of America's country. Understanding this is important.
Right.
Why is wealth important? Because equity and ownership. Equity and ownership is the only thing that matters in America. Our Jewish brothers and sisters, and I love them because they have become the merchant class of this country. We are the consumption class. We are the consumption class. We consume. 400 billion of our 1.2 trillion each year spent during Christmas. So one of the big goals that we have been working on that will take multiple generations is shifting us from the consuming class to the merchant class, creating work and jobs for our people, which is the second goal that we have been working on for 30 years at FraserNet and at the Power Networking Conference, to help black people to build businesses and ultimately become the number one employer of their own people. That we too must ultimately become the number one employer of our own people. Jews are the number one employer of Jews. Asians are the number one employer of Asians. East Indians are the number one employer of East Indians. Arabs are the number one employer of Arabs. We too must ultimately become the number one employer of our own people. We must stop blaming white people for 100% of our problems, and we're giving them 95% of our money. But we give them all our money. Everything goes back to them. They pay us and we give it back to them. Sound like sharecropping to me. It's just very sophisticated. Very sophisticated. We have not risen to the level of intelligence and understanding to shift that. We will, but it's going to take time. Said another way, brothers and sisters, we must stop resenting rich and successful people, even when we don't mean it, because you cannot attract what you resent. So that's money. When we look at the world today, we will see that powerful nations and powerful people are producing people, not consuming people. As I've often said in my many trips around the country, you cannot consume yourself into equality, and you cannot consume yourself into power. And those people who depend upon consumption will see as they consume the products of others and do not produce for themselves will ultimately be consumed by others. Therefore, in the 21st and 22nd century, we must become a community of owners and savers instead of a community of consumers and renters. We must stop buying cars and renting homes. We have that sort of ass backwards. The idea that the black community can exercise effective power, political or otherwise, without simultaneously exercising economic power is a fantasy. Capitalism without capital is just ism. And all we have is ism. What must we do now? We must think entrepreneurially. We must shift our consciousness. I've been saying this for years. We must think entrepreneurially. And there's some good signs that we're moving in the right direction, that we're planting seeds. There was an interesting study that just came out in January, the State of Minority Business 2016, came out in January. Very interesting what this study said. It's the U.S. Census Bureau report on business development by culture. So here's the upside of this report. In the latest 5-year reporting period, there are now 2.6 million African American businesses, a 35% growth. We've had the highest percentage growth of any cultural group in America, 2.6 million. That's the upside. The downside of that is of the 2.6 million businesses, only 111,000 of those businesses employ anybody. Only 111,000 of those businesses, of the 2.6 million businesses, employ anybody. 2.5 million of those businesses are self-employed. Now, when we look at the 2.5 million increase of self-employed black people, that's a 125% increase over the last 5-year reporting period. So there's progress. At least we're thinking that. We're planting seeds. That's how we have to look at it. But here's the downside of this. Of the 111,000 businesses that employ other brothers and sisters, their average annual revenue is $1.3 million a year, and it has grown 82%. Of those 2.5 million that are just self-employed, their average annual revenue is $19,000 a year, and their business has declined over the last 5 years, 11%. And the trend is very clear. Grow or die. But that's everything. Look at nature. Nature tells us that something is either growing or dying. The interesting thing about trees is that they die from the inside out, like a lot of us. So we have to grow our business. One thing to start a business. That's good. That's good. But you can't just start it and not grow it. The report says this, that non-employer businesses, while important and necessary to the livelihood of those who run them, have little or no impact on the economic development, and are not a sustainable source of job growth. So it's important that we start, but unless we're growing, A, you will either be out of business sooner than later, and 2, it has no impact on job growth. We must create work and jobs for our people. That's business. Start a business. So let me give you a little mantra. Just remember this. Buy black, but sell to anybody. You know, I'm down with the black thing. But when it comes to selling, sell to anybody. See, in America, 2 things are going on 24/7. Somebody's buying and somebody's selling. Right now, we're doing all the buying. Stop it. You bake cookies, put them in a box, sell it to somebody. If you live on a farm, take the manure, put it in a bag, put your name on it, and sell it to somebody. You can become an entree manure. But stop doing all the darn buying and sell something. Think entrepreneurially. Start, and most importantly, build businesses. This is critical. There was an interesting study. I hope you saw this study on the new millionaires in America. The new millionaires. Oh boy, this was interesting. Almost 8 million millionaires in America, about a 16% growth year over year. And they broke it down on where did all of these millionaires come from? What was the cause of their becoming a millionaire? So here's the statistics on this, in case nobody's told you this. 1% of the new millionaires come from the stock market, invention, sports, entertainment, and the lottery. You can add them all together, and that represents 1% of the new millionaires. 5% of the new millionaires came from salespeople. Aubrey and I have roots in sales and marketing, selling something. 5%. The best salesman on the planet earns stupid money. 5% of the new millionaires came from just people selling stuff. 10% of the new millionaires came from the creme de la creme brulee doctors and lawyers. Not all doctors and lawyers, but just the best ones who mastered their craft. That's 10% of the new millionaires. And then 10% of the new millionaires came from senior executives, of which we represent less than one half of 1%. Senior executives, C-suite executives. And finally, 74% of the new millionaires minted each year are people who are self-employed, who have a business. 74%. Now, I live in a very shishi-poo-poo neighborhood in Cleveland, Pepper Pike. Sounds shishi-poo-poo, right? I live on a cul-de-sac. You see, in Brooklyn, we used to call it a dead end, but it's, my neighborhood, a cul-de-sac. Okay? I'm down with that. There are 111 homes on my cul-de-sac and in my gated community, all in the deep 6 and 7 figures. Now here's the interesting thing, and I'm not bragging, I'm just making a point here. Here's the interesting thing about my area. Nobody has a job. Everybody where I live has their own business. You cannot be employed by anybody and live on my street. Unless, of course, you are a senior executive or you own a chain of dentistries or a chain of medical offices, right? But still entrepreneurial. So Aubrey has been preaching this gospel for years. He is spot on. And the minute we get this, we will take our people to the promised land. So what have I said? Save the children. Save the children. Save